We are creating a platform for those who are curious, one that tells the story from the artist's perspective. Moments in time captured from the innovators who are reshaping dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. This is the Working Artist Project.
All right, guys, today on the Working Artist Project, we have Mr. Gregory Generet. Gregory is larger than life. You know immediately when he enters a room. His booming voice and loving energy engulfs you immediately. His journey in music is fascinating not because of a great loss or some other cliche mechanism, but because he chose to pursue his dream against all odds. He is one of a few people that I know that exhibits true courage. After enjoying a highly successful 30-plus year career in television, he decided to give it all up, only to dive headfirst into the unknown. He is a living example for anyone who is afraid to take a leap of faith. Help me welcome Gregory Generet to the Working Artist Project.
Good morning. Thank you.
It's a special episode. We're both out here all the way in Doha, Qatar.
In the desert. We're in the desert.
So, man, I want to give, we had a conversation a few weeks ago, and I kind of want to recap that conversation for my audience, I was talking about community.
Right. You said that sense of community is lost. And I said, yeah, it seems to be because a lot of what's happened now is that we are living what that dream was for the most part. I mean, a lot of us have been able to excel economically, educationally, and do what we do. But there is not as many of us. It feels like to me most of the time there are not enough of us involved with the struggle. But it seems that question also for me has begun to be the answer to that question was not so absolute because of the fact of Black Lives Matter.
Right.
That rallied a people, it rallied blacks all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And subsequently it's rallying, people of color all over the world.
Right.
And this is akin to that whole civil rights struggle, which I think is brilliant, and standing in the face of militaristic police that we all now have. It makes perfect sense that the people have finally found a voice as one entity to say, look, this has got to stop. So that you're right, in a sense, that sense of community is lost, but it's slowly beginning to regain ground because of, the problems of today that we have to face.
Yeah. Haven't been in a unique situation where you've experienced like maybe the end of the civil rights era, and now we're back now in the Black Lives Movement era.
Yeah.
Like, how does that feel? Like, it's like, damn.
It's funny that you bring that up because I actually didn't really think about it until we were beginning to have this conversation. And just as you were about to ask the question, it dawned on me. I said, wow, that's kind of interesting because, I lived through that as a kid, not really kind of getting what was happening. I mean, I was 6, 7, 8 years old when that was going on, but I saw what was going on. I mean, I saw the whole King speeches, and I saw what was happening in the news. That's the other thing that got me hooked.
Right. Were your parents like talking to you about it, or
no? I was actually hearing them. They didn't talk to us about it.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was one of those things that you heard them discussing at their cocktail party.
Right. Right.
When somebody come over to the house on Friday night, a few people, and they'd have a bottle of something. And
right.
Everybody starts talking about everything that's going on in their lives or going on in the world. And that's where you sort of get hints about what was going on. But no one ever specifically just said, this is what's happening.
Okay.
A lot of what I've had to learn to this day, it seems, is all because I read and I listen.
Yep.
Because no one seems to, those days of mentorship, I think are lost on us too. That was one of the other things about those big brother organizations and people within the Black community, which I still think is a very vital thing. I mean, I'm involved in something sort of like that because I'm involved with a charity that has human services that we have to deal with every day. So,
okay.
But it's we don't have that sort of rite of passage anymore. We don't have somebody that kind of sits down and walks us through and says, okay, this is what's up.
Right.
And this is what you're going to face, and this is what you're going to deal with, and let you ask all the questions you want. And it sort of feels that way. I can't paint everybody with that brush, but it just always feels that way. And I think it's beholden to us to circle back to what you were talking about community. It's beholden to us to take one person at a time and try to rebuild that.
Yeah.
If there's somebody, I mean, you talk about wanting to do something where you start a camp for kids doing this. I mean, if we don't have people like you in the world doing this, the kids are kind of growing up without any kind of focus.
Yeah. I want to switch gears and like get back into your, cause you worked in TV for a long time.
I did.
Like maybe people who don't know that, maybe people who see you out here around the world, they think you've been singing professionally for the last 40 years or whatever, 30 years, but that's not the case.
I wish I had been singing out here for about 40 years. It's not the case. For 30 years of my professional life, I should say, for 30 years of my adult life, I've been a part of the television industry.
Okay.
Well, this kind of harkens back to what happened when my mother said, about singing, because I never really answered that question. I think I got off on a tangent, but I loved music so much. And I was singing. I used to use the curtain rod that used to hold. You remember those?
Like it's your mic stand.
Yeah, it was my mic thing, man. I just kind of do that whole thing around the house, and I do it for company, and everyone was like, "Oh God, he's so talented! Oh, look, he can really sing." And I was like, "Yeah, I can." And singing in church, and so I was getting solos and things like that. And I was kind of proud of the fact that I could do that as a kid. And my mother looked at me one day, and she could see it in my eyes, and she said, "You know something, son? You could sing for God, but you need a job."
Uh-oh. Right.
And that stuck with me. She didn't even have to sort of explain. I got it. For some reason, as a small child, I got exactly what she meant, because, I mean, it was the focus of the family, too. I mean, the whole thing was about work.
Right.
The interesting thing about that, it was, no one wanted to necessarily be rich. I mean, they would have liked to have been rich, but that's not what it was. It was about getting a good job so you could take care of your family, raise your kids, go on vacation.
There's this whole notion in Black culture of like building upon what your parents already did.
Yeah, you build upon that, and then you keep that going. And that's what my folks were always about. Let's do this. But that I kept that in mind. That saying, I couldn't shake it. And I realized every time I thought about it, it was probably a pipe dream. Yeah. And there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. So I went to, I literally didn't know what I was going to do. I was sitting in high school in a vocational school, Eli Whitney Vocational High School in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And it's a vocational high school. And this was a very unique program at this particular high school, because every month as a freshman, when you came into school as a freshman, every month of the school year, you changed vocations.
Oh, wow.
So they gave you basically your first year of high school an overview of the different kind of careers that were offered.
Wow.
And that they taught, because vocational school. So, I mean, everything from, cosmetology and hair to machine shop work and machinists and electricians and car repair and it was actually really kind of
was there a culinary thing? Did you
they didn't have that's the one thing they didn't have.
Oh man, okay. Okay.
It's the one thing they didn't have. They had all of these other professions, and mind you, television wasn't one of them. Okay. But they were all very manual. It was all very geared toward, what we do, manufacturing and labor. And because I became the class president.
Okay.
10th grade. And I had a really good rapport with the principal and the administration of the school. Everybody kind of liked me. So I was able to walk around and see things that a lot of people didn't see in the school. And I happened upon a room in school that had all this equipment that was unused. They didn't even know they had it, felt like. And so I went and got permission from him to, open a few of these boxes. And I said, whatever I find, could we use? And he said, if it's usable, yeah, let's do it. And I found a television camera.
Oh, wow.
a video camera, and a reel-to-reel video tape recorder.
And you taught yourself how to use it?
Yeah, because the manuals were missing. So I learned I figured out how to put it together and figure out how to use it, and started just using it in school. And I became like hooked.
Wow.
I became hooked. And so when it was time to graduate, I had it planted in my head. I said, that's what I want to do, but is there a school for that? Is somebody, And I went to the college fair in New York.
Okay.
Which was at a place called the Coliseum at the time, which is actually the site where the Time Warner building's on now.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
Wait, that's 59th Street.
Yeah.
Columbus Circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a place called the Coliseum, and it was basically like the Javits Center is. It was, it was just this big structure that had, college fairs, or they had car shows, and
Okay.
they had all this stuff there. And, I went to all of these schools like a young, naive idiot walking around from school to school going, do you offer television courses?
Right.
And listening. I had a bag full of stuff. And, and I found a couple of college universities. I found Syracuse in upstate New York. And I found San Francisco State, which basically were the two schools in the country, universities in the country, that offered television sciences and broadcast services. And I thought, okay, well, let me try these out. And just as I'm leaving, I found this little school that had a booth right by the exit.
Mm-hmm.
And they had all of these pictures, like we were surrounded here, of, students doing television.
Wow.
Cameras and everything else. So, wow, where's that? And I said, it's in Boston, this little school called Graham Junior College. And I talked to this guy for about an hour, and I was hooked.
Wow.
And I went up there and got my mother to let me, go by myself up to Boston to check it out. And I went to this I went to YMCA, spent the night, and spent the weekend up in Boston and kind of overlooking the school, and I fell in love. And
wow.
I ended up going to school there, and that's where I learned to do the job. Well, do one of many jobs in television,
mm-hmm.
but it also is where I got a resume. So I began to work freelance while I was in school.
Oh, cool.
At the different companies, insurance companies and television, telephone companies up there that had their own in-house production studios. And so that's how I learned the business. So by the time I graduated, I actually had a resume.
Wow.
And I got called to work summer relief at ABC in 1979.
Okay. Back in the city, back in New York.
Back in New York.
Okay.
Because I did an interview the year before that my professor sent me on, knowing I was never going to get the job, but it was just so I could understand what the network was about. And, it was basically a fact-finding tour for me. And I got this interview. And they called me back.
Wow.
And said, 2 weeks out of school, they called me back and said, remember that interview you took? You still interested in working for us? It's only for a couple of months because of summer relief. And I said, when do I start? And I stayed 2 years.
Wow. At ABC.
At ABC. Wow. I stayed 2 years there, went off to HBO from there. And right after HBO, I went to CBS and ended my career there, 25 years.
Wow.
30 years total in the business.
And so over there, what you were doing, what at each place?
I was, I was a videotape engineer and operator.
Okay.
So basically, we were using reel-to-reel video. I was making recordings and learning editing machine to machine.
Right.
I was on the first crew of 2020.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I worked on Wide World of Sports.
Okay.
I worked on Nightline, which was the show that was started because of the Iranian hostage crisis.
Really?
Yeah. So
I didn't realize
on that. And I did my first Olympic game, but I did it from New York at Lake Placid, 1980 Olympics.
Right.
For ABC. And so I was doing that. And because I became, a bit proficient at it, I my word got out from other people I'd worked with who moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would call me and say, listen, there's an opening here. And that's how I got to HBO and doing basically the same thing. And then I began to learn how to do video switching because we worked in a master control setting where, we were taking all the feeds for the East Coast and the West Coast and just sort of playing movie after movie after movie. But then we were also doing reel changes at that time on the movies. There wasn't just one tape that had the entire film on it. You had 2 reels, sometimes 3.
Oh, wow.
And you had to sync them up.
So the movie.
You had to sync them up, and you only had sometimes a minute.
Wow.
Sometimes you had 3 minutes.
Okay.
And you had to sync it up and then take to the new reel machine. It was quite a ordeal, but it was fun.
Wow.
Excuse me. And then I moved on to CBS where I was doing some of the same thing, but I was working on just varied programming. We did everything from sit there and watch. One of my jobs at the time when I started was we had to watch a soap opera to the entire thing front to end to make sure that it was technically optimal to go on the air, no problems, and you have to write up whatever. And that's how we got, all of us who used to do that, we got hooked on soaps because, all of a sudden we, like, wow, okay, we had to make sure we
one life to live.
Yeah, for us, yes, it was like As the World Turns.
As the World Turns, yeah.
Young and the Restless.
Yeah.
It was.
My grandmother loves those.
Guiding Light.
Yeah.
Wow. And these are all the things I grew up with, right? And so I got a real kick out of the fact that I was able to do that because I saw it weeks in advance.
Right.
And I'd be on the train coming to work and I'd hear people talking about the stories.
Right. The stories.
Stories and talking about what was going on. And I'm thinking, wait until you see next week.
Right. Man, but you don't leave nothing out, man. So you won a lot of awards for your work. In television.
I've won some. I won Emmy awards, but they were a part of a larger, group of winning for these broadcasts that we've done. I covered in my capacity of doing what I do. I guess in the neighborhood of 4 Olympic Games.
Wow.
I used to work on the NFL Today. I did NFL football for CBS as well as the evening news with Dan Rather, and then subsequently morning news and all kinds of things. And so it's tied up in doing all of that kind of work. It was nice, but
You did it though, man. That's great.
I did it.
That's great, man.
I did it.
How did you know it was time for you to leave television? You know what I mean? Like after all of the success, you went in Emmys, you're on all of the biggest shows in the world, HBO, 2020, Nightline. You know what I mean? You got a lot of accomplishments. Why would you just up and quit? I'm sure you were getting paid a very generous salary. And so you decided to stop television and pursue music.
At the time, what I was finding out in the last, I guess, 10 years of the job that I was doing was that there was some dissatisfaction for me. I've been working on all these shows, and mind you, personally, I just always felt like I was chasing something because I wanted to be better. I was good enough as far as I'm concerned to do what I was doing, but there were guys who were great at doing what they were doing. I was ending the last 10 years of my career there. I was working in post-production editing, which is, basically building stories from scratch or taking stories and embellishing them with effects and graphics and, music. And I had a partner through the last portion of that who was really significant to me. Dave Shore is a guy who was one of these incredibly sort of now thinking young men who was only less than 10 years younger than me, but he was so quick on his feet with thinking about how to do this stuff. And I wasn't,
Okay.
I realized something. I realized everything was changing around me because I was being taught television by the guys who literally created the industry. I mean, when I went to CBS was basically known in the industry as a closed shop, which means that they didn't hire people for summer replacements to cover their vacation shifts, because summer is huge. Everybody, these networks would just sort of have huge swaths of hiring because they needed the bodies to fill for these guys who would go off for 8-10 weeks,
right?
For vacation. And CBS was not a place that did that. And so, this was one of those years when I came into work there was late 1981, 1982. There was this huge hiring that they had to do because they were starting 2 programs and they wanted to man them. And so I go into this place and it was like walking into a museum.
Oh, wow.
I'd never seen the network before. And basically here I was coming out of, college, being one of the newer guys.
Right.
So when we were doing what we were doing, we were already ahead of the curve with technology, in a sense. Beta tapes and 1-inch recording, that kind of stuff that's actually kind of fossilized now,
right? Because
everybody's doing it on their computer. That stuff was new technology for when I came in, because these guys were using the old technology. This is the only place I'd ever gone to where I could actually see someone physically edit videotape with a razor blade.
Oh shit!
They were still editing certain shows like Sesame Street with a razor blade. Okay. No one else was doing this. This is how old these guys were, and they were great at it.
Wow!
I'd never tried it. When those edit sessions came up, I just wanted to watch because
right.
I'd only read about it. I never saw anyone who had ever done it. That's how the technology was. I mean, it was like walking into the 1950s. Everything had toggle switches.
Wow! So
knobs,
it's like analog, like
totally. I mean, to be able to go and see the set for the evening news with Walter Cronkite, which was the set that Dan Rather had taken over.
Right.
And to walk into that room and see that it wasn't very big at all, and that there are all of these knobs and switches and dials, and you're just going,
right,
what happened here? I mean, the older guys walking around in white shirts and neckties.
Right.
Where everybody else out of the places that I worked were in jeans and sneakers and going, hey man, what are you dressed like that for? What are you, management?
Right.
And, it was a different world. But I was taught television by these guys who worked on Edward R. Murrow's shows and who worked on some of the finest documentaries, in television. And CBS News especially was, a pillar in the business. So I was very honored to work there and to work alongside and to meet people like Mike Wallace and Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather and Diane Sawyer and Brent Musburger and Greg Gumbel and all of these people that I got to spend time with doing the job that we did and turning out a really good product. Wow. But I started becoming disillusioned because the company was taken over by a different entity, and then the entity started talking about how we needed to make more money, and so things were about being quick and being fast, and they started looking at what we did as being too old, too long, and too slow. And of course, younger people were coming in who were being raised on computer technology, which was great. Yeah. Except that they didn't know the business of television. They knew how to move pictures around and do things on the computer, but they didn't know how this whole process was supposed to actually work.
Gotcha. And
so, trying to get the both of us to work together was an interesting prospect. And we were able to do it because, that's what you do. You show someone younger about what's happening, what's going on. But then it became more about utilizing what you knew more and utilizing them because they could do it quicker and they didn't necessarily have to do it as well as you did. It could be a little messy at it, but it's okay because no one's going to notice. We got a lot of that. And so I became a lot more disillusioned by the whole prospect of what I was doing. And then I started seeing myself turning into like one of my colleagues because, like I said, this place was like a mausoleum in a sense because you know, I'm working alongside guys, gentlemen who were past retirement age.
Oh, wow.
You know, and they were still working there and sitting there looking at the ticker tape of their stock because they had, you know, we all had
pensions and everything.
Yeah, we had you know, our packages, and they wanted to make sure their packages, their retirement funds were doing well. And I said, I can't do that. I can't turn into that.
Gotcha.
I can't turn into that. So my wife at the time, my ex-wife now, was she was evident in getting me to think about leaving.
Ah, okay.
And because of it, I'd become sick a couple of times being there and ended up in the hospital. And those are the long stories. And, you know, after all of that and convalescing and getting back to work and finally coming back, I felt like I'd landed on a different planet because I realized that, you know, it wasn't for me anymore. I said, maybe it was my time to either kind of sit down like these other guys were and not think about it anymore, or was it time for me to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scared, but it was a decision that thankfully it was made with the help of my wife at the time, who said, listen, you know, we're doing okay, and let's, you know, if you need to do that, because I'd rather be able to talk to you now for a while because, you know, I mean, I was spending 18 hours a day there and 7 days a week. And when I wasn't there, I was trying to be a good husband and do the things with my wife that one does as well. And because, you know, we had a very different relationship than most people, so we were busy a lot socially, that I was tired all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and so I quit my job.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there having coffee one morning, have the news on because I'm still a news junkie, and, and I'm reading New York Times, and I got my cup of coffee, and all of a sudden it dawns on me, I quit my job. Like, what are you, an idiot? I quit my job. What the hell did I do that for?
Yeah.
Because now the panic began to really set in. And she said, yeah, you quit your job. Now what?
Right.
You know, she says, because, you know, did that sink in now? Okay, so now what?
Right.
And I thought, wow, I don't know. And she said, well, you know, you've been running around here, sitting in with people and singing, and everybody says that you should try it, you should do it. And, you know, now what kind of excuse do you have?
Yeah.
You know, you told us all the excuses before, and now you don't have them, you know, so.
Get to it.
You know, you met enough people, you met enough musicians, you hang out enough at jazz clubs, you know a lot of these people, why don't you just see what needs to be done and do it? And, that was 8 years ago.
Wow.
9 years ago.
And on it.
I met Najee Allen Gums in that period. I met a few people. I met Najee Allen Gums, who is a producer and arranger and pianist. Wonderful guy for that work, and put together a really fine group of men to work with for me. And Tamara and I produced this CD.
Okay.
Because of it. And, you know, we got some decent notices out of it, but the rest of it was, you know, sort of when it was done, it was one of those situations of, okay, well, what do I do now?
Right.
Because, you know, as you know, And just as in business that we come to in entertainment, no one necessarily tells you how to do this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And because I don't come from a schooled background, I've not had this as a child and then developed it into, you know, an educational program that I've gone through and taken that to, you know, a master's degree or a doctoral degree in music, jazz studies, or any of that stuff. I mean, I don't come from that world. So I'm competing on that level. I'm competing with people who are half my age, if not younger, on that level. And I had to figure out how to stand out, but not stand too far out.
Wow.
And that was an interesting sort of tightrope to walk.
Yeah. Damn. What do you mean by that? Like, how does that, why did you feel like that was important?
Well, because there was I needed to work. And I needed to work immediately, but I also needed to work because it was the only way I was going to gain any kind of experience about what it was I was doing. I mean, yes, I've been kind of singing and doing this for years, but not on a professional level.
Right.
And so, you know, there's a whole certain set of difficulties and rationales that you have to come to and deal with in navigating yourself through this music. And I didn't know what those were. And I'm still learning about what those are. Thankfully, I will never stop learning about what those are.
Yeah.
But what I was finding was that I had to have the perception of that I had been doing this for a long time.
Right.
Without overstepping that perception to the point where people sort of, you know, that became a lie.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be a perception, but it couldn't be a lie.
Right.
Because that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want anything I did based on that. So that's what I mean by, you know, being able to stand out, but not stand out too much.
Right.
You know, I wanted to be able to be looked upon as serious about doing it.
Yep.
And not that it was a hobby.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And that was very important to me. And so for me, it was about being able to nurture those relationships I'd had over the years with musicians and with club owners. Mm-hmm. And then I met a lot of people that I didn't know because of the great Sheila Anderson, the Queen of Hang. We met at a book signing of a mutual acquaintance, subsequent friend, the chef and restaurateur Alexander Smalls.
Okay.
Who has
he owns
Mittens and Red
Cecil's.
Yeah, Cecil's.
Yeah.
And we went to a book signing of his, of a re-release of a book that he'd already written. And that's where I actually met her and Eric Reed.
Ah, okay.
And this was very early in my process.
Yeah.
And that night, the three of us started talking at this book signing, and it was as though we'd been friends for years. And I just, you know, and from that point on, and Sheila and I have been friends for years ever since. I mean, we were still thick as thieves for the most part. But, you know, I told Sheila what I was trying to do, and she says, really? You know, so she's, you know, like her nickname is the Queen of Hang. So we just hung out. She would take me to clubs and introduce me to people. And, you know, I'd start my own relationship. She didn't talk anything up because, you know, she hadn't heard me. So it was just, you know, one of those situations. This is so-and-so, this is Gregory, and yada, yada. And then I did it from there. And everything that I did was not based on, I need a job. Mm-hmm. It was based on a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, how I feel about the music. What is it that moves me or drives me? What is it that they're doing at their particular club that I appreciate? You know, who is the standout there insofar as what they're doing? Are they going for a particular vibe in the music that they're programming? You know, having those kinds of conversations helped a great deal. It also didn't hurt that, you know, I was well dressed most of the time.
See, that's the thing one of the things I admire about you most is your ability to connect with anybody. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's kind of lost, at least in my generation. You know what I mean? People are kind of introverted and afraid to engage people, but they don't know. See, you've never met a stranger. You know what I'm saying? Just being here, you talk to everybody as if they are your best friend. Like, how do you develop that skill? You know?
I'm a lifelong people person. It's I really can't tell you how it developed. It became about the fact that, it's also it's one of the things that I learned in church, because we are all brothers and sisters, you know, and because you have so many visiting church people, there's this sort of known kind of camaraderie. Yeah. You know, we're in the same ilk. We kind of like the same things when we do it. But, that was for that. Mm-hmm. I had a hell of a time trying to do it in my personal life, because as a kid, I didn't know how. I was more shy than I thought. Oh, what? I didn't realize it. Okay. It was one of those things that had never dawned on me, but especially I went to Catholic school. Okay. For 5 years of from third grade to eighth grade. Mm-hmm. And that was of course, that was a sheltered place. That was one of those situations where my mother, I literally sort of got removed from school because I talked too much. Wow. They got mad at me because I got tired of not being called on. And so I start shouting out answers. And so they'd call my mother to school and she'd be pissed at me. And, I'd get a whipping. Right. And then I'd go back to school and try to hammer down and deal with it. And they still wouldn't do it. And I still did it again. She said, apparently you don't need to be there. Right. So she said, I'm going to send you to Catholic school. And why she said that? I thought, no. Right. It's like, oh my God, all I heard about was, nuns, penguins beating up kids. That's right. I didn't want to go any place like that. And sure enough, my first day, that's what happened. Yeah. I saw a kid get schnockered by this nun. And I said, oh. And I was straight as an arrow ever since. And it took me a long time to warm up to people at that point. Cause now I'm in this environment where we're not like the same people. You're Catholic, and I don't even know what that's about. Right. Okay. I come from Southern Baptists. I come from people preaching fire and brimstone, and I go to some place where everybody's going, Anno Domini, Steady Fili to Spiritu Sancti, and you're going, wow, okay, this is interesting. What is that about? Mm-hmm. And then it caught on. And I started to basically kind of hang out with the nuns and the teachers because I felt more comfortable becoming comfortable with them than I did with all these other students who come from this other land that I don't know anything about. And then I slowly began to get to know, those people, to know other students, but it took a long time. Wow. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So something interesting about you is you're a chef, so to speak. And to prove that you've even been on a cooking show. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that's crazy. Yeah. How did that happen? That was, that's crazy. I learned to cook on my own, basically, because I used to, again, my home is the basis of everything that I do. My mother was probably one of the best cooks I'd ever known. Okay. Southern cook. Yeah. Of course. And we all love our mother's cooking. Yeah. Most of us. My mama didn't cook. Like I said, most of us. But I learned after watching her for years, man, all she did was, that's basically what she did all the time. She'd come home, she'd sit down for a minute, she'd get into the kitchen, start making something. And she was either making a cake for someone or she was making our dinner and making someone else something else to take to them at the hospital or take to the church the next day or whatever. And so she was always cooking. And I used to sit there and watch her put this into that and this into that. And, finally one day I figured out how to do it on my own and thought I'd surprise her when she got home and actually have dinner made. Oh, wow. And she looked at me and she said, this is not bad. And so subsequently I kept doing it to the point where I enjoyed it. Wow. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And so for me, I have a massive cookbook collection, you know, and I read them through because they're interesting, but I don't necessarily, I'll follow the recipe once to see how it's supposed to come out.
Yeah.
And then I start adding, it might taste better if I do this, or if I do this, or if I do that. And so the whole, you know, I was basically kind of known in the marriage as being
the chef.
Yeah. And so everyone would come to my house for dinner, and we would, I can't tell you how many dinners I've made for people. And, you know, I used to escape into food as well, because when things, you know, weren't going well, of course, we go to our comfort zone.
Of course.
So mine was turning on some great jazz music and starting to cook.
Wow.
Because cooking is patience. It's, you know, everything basically only takes 20 minutes. It's all the preparation to get to that point.
Yeah.
It takes forever.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I do things like I drive all over the city, man, to get, I go to a place, Ottamanelli Meats in the Village. Yeah. It's been there forever. I go there to buy my meat.
That's a great thing about New York, man.
Yeah, man. You've got, it's the food. It literally is the food capital.
Yeah.
So you can get anything. And because you have all these great green markets, I can get great farm fresh vegetables and, you know, and I go to the lobster place to buy my fish in Chelsea Piers and that kind of thing, you know, and I got into doing that. I drive all over the city to get the ingredients for one dinner.
Right.
You know, and I just sort of got into it. And so what had happened was my ex-wife was a contestant on Chopped.
Okay.
For celebrities.
Okay.
And then what she'd done was she realized that when she got there, she was scared out of her wits. Because they, you know, they don't have to ask to do this; they're chosen, right? So she's going, okay, I'll do this, but yeah, and she cooks, you know, she cooks well. But she was looking at this, going, "This is crazy. This is crazy.
It's like next level."
And so she was an alternate on the show, which she was glad to find out. She was like, okay, because I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
But she told them about me. And so they called me up and said, can we have a conversation? And I said, sure. And they said, they're not asking me to do the show or anything. They wanted to ask me about food.
Right.
So they said, it'll only take about 15 minutes. We'll sit and talk about food. And I said, great. You know, like half hour later.
Yeah.
I'm going on about my passion about making this, about doing that, about doing this. So, you know, they contacted me and said, listen, we'd like to have you put in an application for our amateur contest. And I'm like, okay. Couldn't hurt, right? Yeah. You know, I'm not going to get chosen. I get chosen.
Damn.
And I get chosen 2 weeks before I come here.
To Doha. This was this year?
This was 2014.
2014.
2 weeks before I come to go here, they tell me congratulations. You're going to be one of our contestants. And I go, oh, okay.
Right.
But suddenly the wonder of that just didn't really dawn on me. It was coming here.
Yeah.
Because this was going to be something I had never experienced. It was also something that I never expected.
Yeah.
And in my, you know, journey of trying to do this music. And so this became more my focus. And so, you know, they'd be sending me emails while I'm here about what they want, what they need. I'm like, why people bother me? I got to learn these tunes for tonight and get all of this stuff done. And so finally, you know, I'm starting to really kind of grasp the gravity of it all, that I'm actually going to be doing this show. And I go, I don't know what to do. Suddenly I'm going to be one of these people who goes, I don't know what to cook. And so I started talking to the Michelin star chef that was in Gordon Ramsay.
Cool. Yeah.
And we started talking about food a lot. And I'd say, well, how do you do this? And he said, what are you doing tomorrow afternoon? I said, you know, we have our days. And he says, well, come by the kitchen. And so I came by the kitchen. And we spent 3 hours breaking down a chicken, making sauce, cooking lamb.
Wow.
You know, and it was great.
Wow.
You know, it was great. But this is also the trajectory that I'd taken in cooking. I'd come to know so many people in the restaurant business. That was one of my things. Right. I mean, all over the world, wherever we flew to, I always wanted to be in the kitchen and seeing how they did something, what they did. That became my fascination.
Wow.
And so that's how I got to the food thing. And so basically, subsequently, I was here in 2014, and I was to leave in May 8th.
Okay.
Was my last day here. May 9th, May 10th, I was supposed to be in the studio.
Cooking for Chop,
right? So I take a 20-hour flight home with layover.
Wow.
And I had like a bit of a day in between, and then at 5 a.m. I had to be at the studio.
That's insane.
So talk about not knowing what to do.
Right.
I was sort of sleepwalking through this entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever watched the episode, I was chopped. But I did the show.
But you did the show.
I did do the show.
So when do you open your restaurant, man?
Well, one never knows.
There's some room in Bed-Stuy.
There's always something there. I mean, I come up with things about that because I actually have always wanted to have a restaurant, even before the music and even before anything else. I realized how much I did love cooking. I said, man, I would love to have my own place, and talked about it with a few friends who were already in the business over the years, but, of course, we never follow through on something like that. It's a big undertaking.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking. Maybe one day, man.
Maybe. Don't go far.
So,
As they say, watch this space.
Right. What are some things that, if you could name two things that you're most grateful for on this journey thus far, you know what I mean? Like, you've been through some major transitions.
Yeah.
What are some couple of things that you're most thankful for?
I'm most thankful, really, for the resilience that I seem to have acquired that I never thought I had. To leave something that I had grown to love and be comfortable with. And to just get the feeling that my life had to take a turn to something else. I never knew what that was. I was following my heart, and I think that's how, if believe in God or not, but I think that's how the universe speaks to us. I think we get something that is so powerful that tells us to do something.
Yeah.
That instinct that we want to call it, that we just, if we open ourselves up to it and follow it, it usually leads us to something. We always think that it has to be something good, quote unquote. What we don't realize is that change is good, and it requires fear. It requires strength, and it requires tenacity, and it needs to be, you need to have enough faith in the fact that something is going to come from this that is going to be beneficial. And I read someplace once, leap and the net will appear.
Wow.
If you just sort of step out on faith, something's going to happen. You're not going, sometimes we get in our own way because we overthink it, and we get to the point where we think, everybody knows that somehow you should have a plan, but sometimes you don't have a plan.
Yeah.
I never had a plan. I was always crippled by the fact that I didn't have a plan.
Wow.
Because everyone always said to me, so what are you going to do next? And I go, I have no idea. And that scared me more than anything, because everyone kept looking at you, and still do to this day, to say, well, you got to have a plan, and my plan is to do what I enjoy doing on all of those different places. But, I'm not a type A personality in the regard that I knew exactly what I wanted to do from the moment I stepped on stage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just it was never that plan. Whatever happened was a progression of beautiful things that were happening in those moments that led to another moment, just like all those moments that I was able to do what I did in TV and then suddenly find myself feeling dissatisfied.
Yeah.
And not wanting to see myself grow old, just wanting to see myself stop being a spectator in life and start being more of a participant. And it's kind of funny because on a certain level, we are spectators in doing the business that we do. We're watching for you so that we can bring you these stories and
right.
we can bring you this point of view that you can take a look at and discern from yourself what it is you want to do about it. For me, instead of just talking about those things, I wanted to be a part of them. I wanted to know what it was like to be in another country. I want to know what it's like to be here. I mean, look at us. We're in a Muslim country.
Right.
You know, something that neither one of us thought we'd be sort of sitting and dealing with, especially after 9/11, all the things that went on after that. But it's a whole different perspective and a whole nother point of view, something that you know, from a sociological standpoint is fascinating.
Yeah.
But like I said, those are moments that have taken me other moments. The only thing I've ever said that I wanted to do is I just want to sing, and I want to be successful enough to sing to pay my bills. That's all I want to be able to do. You know,
it is.
But it's not an easy thing to do because there's, you know, of course, it'd be nice to just stand up there and sing, but you just can't do that. There's a lot of prep that has to go, not only in that, but there's a lot of things that has to happen to continue that.
Yeah, of course.
On to the next thing. And so if you could say what I'm grateful for, is that I have been blessed with resilience.
Wow. There it is. You heard it first. I want to thank Mr. Gregory Generet for participating in the Working Artist Project. And, you know, we got to follow this up with a part 2 one day.
I think so, because we didn't really get to talk about the other stuff from the music that I got into. But thank you for talking about life, because I don't get to tell this story or get to even get my thoughts out on it. Just in conversation, I like the fact that you chose questions, I should say, that made me think about life a little bit deeper.
Yeah, man.
You know, because that's what we want to do, man. We get to know each other through shared experiences, right?
There it is.
So keep on keeping on, brother. You know, you're an example to me.
Oh, man. Thank you, bro.
So, cheers.
Hey, guys. Thanks for listening to the Working Artist Project. But before you go, I just need you to do one more thing. Don't forget to hit the like button, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can also reach me at DarrianDouglas.com. Just when you get there, just go to the contact page, drop me a line. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know if you like the podcast. I want to know if you want to hear certain topics. Whatever it is, just let me know. Let me know what it is, and I'll do my best to make it happen. Oh, yeah. Before I forget, also, you can catch me on Facebook by typing in the Working Artist Project, or you can just type in Darrian Douglas. I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Later.